And we are live. Your life is full of stories, and that's what makes you unique in your business. Those experiences and opinions and values are the sum of who you are. I'm Helen Harwood Snell. I'm an expert storyteller, a certified communication coach, and I show you how to embrace stories to be seen, to create trust, and to close more sales. So, if you're struggling with confidence in your message or standing out in the crowd, storytelling might be for you. So every week I introduce you to a new guest. We learn a little bit about their personality, a little bit about their business, and then I ask them to share a story that I create into a story they can use in their business. So I hope you'll play along and listen in. I'm so excited to introduce you to my guest today. This is Geeta Sidhu Rob. She is joining us from the UK, and she is a 5-time winner of the Entrepreneur and Businesswoman of the Year awards. Her first successful business called Nosh Detox was in the health and nutrition industry. She started that in 2008, followed that with coaching programs for female CEOs, celebrities, world leaders. And in 2023, she launched the Womanist Movement. You may have heard of B Corp businesses. She offers W Corp. We're going to learn more about that. We're going to learn about Green Flag certification and W Corp allies. This movement, too, has received recognition and awards from places as prestigious as the UN and has spread across 6 continents in just 2 years. Welcome, Geeta.
Thank you so much for having me, Helen.
I'm excited to talk about all the things you have done in and for the world. So I always love to start with things on the personal side because it helps me get to know who you are so I can create those stories. So I know in your previous correspondence, you told me that you started your first business when you were a single mom. So I would love to know what inspires you, what inspired you to start that business as a single mom, and how you escape business to just be yourself. Who is Geeta outside of work?
Yeah, pretty boring, I think. I started the business because I was poor and we needed to eat. And I had one child that was ill and I was a lawyer. And in those days, often in these days too, there was no place for a woman to be a mother and a lawyer and to have a sick child. So I ended, I would come home from the hospital at I would sleep with my son overnight, I'd come home at 8, 9 in the morning. And I remember one time closing the door behind me and I had slid to the floor and I woke up 4 hours later, just sitting, leaning against the door of my house. And I hadn't managed to move any further because, you didn't sleep at night. And so I needed to find I had certain criteria. I had to work from home. I had to make enough money to put 3 kids through school, which is a huge amount of money. Our private schools are very expensive.
Mm-hmm.
And I had to be around for my son the whole time, because you just never knew when you would get called to hospital or you weren't, so I had to work for myself again. And I was like, well, what do I do? So I started off as a consultant and then I was like, this is ridiculous. I'm not building anything. What can I do if I could build something? And that I remember that having that very clear thought. And then the only thing I knew how to do was health, because I had helped my son heal. And I thought, well, maybe somebody else has this problem.
Awesome. Can you tell me more about that, about the health journey with your son?
He started with, there was an injection that he was given that we give quite commonly here with kids. And for some reason, he'd had an allergic reaction to it. And so the first one, he had a little patch of eczema. With the second one, he had eczema across his face and his chest. And with the third injection, because it's usually one a month, he had it everywhere except the side of his neck and the soles of his feet and the palms of his hands. And it was a really awful experience because I was in my 20s, so I wasn't very old. And I, although my children probably dispute that because they feel old. And I was either fighting, and every time the eczema would go into remission, he got asthma. So you were either up all night counting the next breath to make sure he didn't die, or you were up all night, this child trying to sleeping with his hands and his feet in your hands and scratching himself because he bled. And there was no solution. So they were like, there is no cure. And I'm like, there has to be. And then anaphylaxis started when we started giving him food. So I cured the asthma, I cured the eczema. And the anaphylaxis, I didn't cure it, but I boosted his immune system to such an extent that it was, a viable proposition to live.
Amazing. Wow. Well, congratulations on that. It is
Thank you.
a hard undertaking to, first of all, be a mom with a sick child, but
Yeah.
secondly, to kind of take on the medical system and make those changes and do the things that
Well,
you
and
needed
to be
to.
it as a brown woman is much, much worse. And if I had been black, it would have been even worse.
Yeah. Yeah. And I would have to say that is not just in Britain.
No, no, no. It's across the United States. It's across. This is something I didn't pay much attention to, and I'm doing a TED talk next week.
Oh,
And
congratulations.
at a TEDx sponsor. Well, I'm terrified, which is ridiculous because I'm on stage every week. And it's sponsored by the Gates Foundation, and they wanted to talk about infant mortality in the global south. And I'm like, this is not acceptable. We need to stop othering these problems because we have this problem up the road. It's
Yeah.
literally up the road. Let's not say it happens in another country. It's happening in our country. And it's
Mhm.
been a real shock to this. And it's a memory of all those things I went through with my son.
Wow. You know what? That's probably why you've got the nerves, because
I
it's
think
touching a real personal chord for you, right?
Yeah, and also, they do that thing where when the kids were little, they would say things like, "You have to go home at night," and I'm like, "No." They're like, "Well, you have nowhere to sleep." I'm like, "That's all good," because they would say to me, when he leaves, we're going to give him this, and when you leave, we'll give him this injection because we think it's a good idea. I'm like, "You don't have permission." I remember a doctor looking at me and saying, "But once I've given it, there's nothing you can do to stop me." And I knew that he shouldn't get that injection because I knew the previous ones, but they don't listen to you. And I slept on the floor on an incontinence mat because the nurses would give me that when the doctors left. And I did that every time he was in hospital, which was, about once a week. So it
Oh
was
my
an interesting
goodness.
experience.
Yeah. So that is kind of the beginning of your journey and the personal connection that you have to that. Tell me a little bit more about when you're not doing business now. What are you doing that actually lights you up? What do you do for fun?
I, you know, I was a daredevil. So that had to stop when I had children because I was like, I'm the only person between them, kind of them and poverty and penury and homelessness. So I've kind of always like jumping off things and on things and off, all this stuff. And that's slowly coming back because now they're old enough to be okay if something happens to me. I love to read. I like to do things with my hands because I grew up in a world which had no television because I grew up in the middle of sub-Saharan Africa on a farm. We didn't grow up with TV. So I'm not used to sitting in front of a screen and I do that all day, of course. Um, and the only time I've sort of ever watched TV, if I was on TV and I wanted to critique what I was doing, it's not my idea of entertainment. So I like to either bake and I'm really not a housewife. So this is a unique thing. I like to do jigsaw puzzles. I used to like to knit and I don't like that anymore. I exercise, I work out. I'm a lawyer, so I'm used to reading really boring stuff and kind of extracting. And so I kind of like finding out new things. I'm always interested in something around women and how it works and how the world works and why and how. Geopolitics is a huge passion of mine.
Amazing.
Yeah, I'm
Amazing.
actually quite boring.
Well, except for that very initial comment about I like to jump off of things and onto things. So tell me about at least one daredevil exploit you've had.
I've abseiled down buildings.
Wow.
Yeah, I'm always terrified, right? Let's be really clear. I looked out and I'm like, why am I doing this? Why am I doing this? Why am I doing this? Let's do it. But I feel like that about most of life. I find life generally quite morbidly terrifying. And I'm always like, oh God, will this work? Don't know. Let's try it. It's sort of, I like when people aren't warriors. I really admire that. I'm an inherent
Yes.
warrior.
You know what? There's something about, what's that saying that, be afraid, but do it anyways, right? There's
Yeah,
really something
courage.
to be said about that. I went through that experience myself when I was quite young. When I was in my 20s, I went through the whole process of learning how to parachute, and unfortunately,
Ooh,
never made it up because every time I was there, it was too windy. I went through a whole summer. I would do all of the training. I actually jumped off of probably the equivalent of like maybe a 2-story building. They taught you how to drop and roll and all that stuff. I did all the things, and then I never got to parachute, and now I can't because I blew out my knees playing sports. But
Oh no.
yeah, I always wanted to jump, so I'm a jumper too. I get it.
Right? I just love that. But I think it's also, I think there's a part of that where I'm actually a high functioning introvert. It comes from growing up in the middle of nowhere, I'm sure, but I
Yeah.
am a really high functioning introvert. So, which is why I'm also very comfortable on TV and on stage, because you're alone. You know, it's very different to walk into a room with 10 people, 20 people I don't know is really my idea of utter fear. But you know, when you jump off things, you're doing them alone. So there's a part of me that's like, ooh, you know,
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, that's super fun. So you have done a lot of great things with your life, and we're going to get into that. Tell me if there's a bucket list item, something that you haven't done yet that you want to do.
I want to speak at the World Economic Forum. I had the was speaking at the UN as a bucket list. I did that this year and I did it last year. So I've done that twice in the spirit of overachieving. And I want to speak at the World Economic Forum. And so I think because I walked around there and there were no women, there were so few women. I was like, this is just unreasonable. I want to do this, you know, so I'd like to do that. Bucket list. I don't know. I've never been to a spa. Like, you know, when people go on retreats, I'm like, so what do you do? And they're like, we do nothing. And I'm like, damn, really? And then what do you do? They're like, more nothing. And I'm like, oh, when I grow up, I want to go do one of those. I ran a detox business. So I would put people through these. I have never been to one of those spa retreaty things. I feel like
Wow.
one should somehow. I don't know.
Yeah, I would actually have to say from my own experience, rather than thinking of doing nothing, thinking of the opportunity to let something new show up in your life or let go of something. Like that's what I find when you're in a quiet state like that, when you're relaxing, maybe you're, you know, in a hot tub, you're getting a massage, whatever it is, or if there's experiences throughout a weekend retreat program. I think it's about connecting with yourself in a different way, which we often don't do when we're so busy, right? It's always work and parenting and
No, I'm very clear about that. I couldn't run my life without being highly, highly connected. I completely see the point,
yeah.
but I'm like, I need to do that every day. I don't know how to live without doing that because my life would not work if I did that.
Awesome. Well, that's probably why you don't need a spa.
It still feels wrong, you know, it still feels wrong. There's still a place where I'm like, I'm going to go to one of these. I'll go find one.
Oh, you definitely you need to do that at some point for sure. I just spent several hours at a spa on this past weekend with my son, just like hanging out, relaxing,
Oh, I
sauna,
love
cold
that for
plunge, all that stuff.
you.
Yeah, it was a beautiful day. We just caught up, spent the afternoon together. It was a lot of fun. So, so tell me then, maybe two or three of your core values in life.
I think I sort of have never defined myself in a way like that, but I think that my life has my it has been worth living for me if what I've done is I've had impact. I think it's
Mm,
important. To me, it's
okay.
wildly important to be honest. It's wildly important for me to make a difference. I don't want to die having not had the differences that I could have made. And so
Mhm.
and that's an ever expanding thing because by the time you get here, you're like, oh, I could do that. So that's really important to me. Um,
Yes.
you know, I was going to say justice, which is true, but one of a core value, this sounds really stupid. I just believe in laughter. I believe
Mhm.
I'm, you know, when my best friend's daughter was laughing at me. She goes, you know, when you come around, all I hear through, because we always share a bed, because like we used to be at school with each other, and it's good. She's like, you're the only person that's allowed in bed because she's fussy as hell. And I'm like, shut up. And we go and we're laughing like all night. And I'm there for usually 2 or 3 nights because she doesn't live in the same country. And I have such a high humor. Life has so many tragedies. It has so many problems. It has so much stuff that the ability to be able to take a moment of great tension and have some laughter in it. I don't know if that's a
Absolutely.
value, but it is vitally important to me. I really believe in it.
I
I'm that
love
weird,
that as a core value.
yeah, I'm that weird person that sends you these things that I think are hysterically funny on Instagram, and everybody's like, "Why did you send this?" I'm like, "Oh my god, it's so funny." They're like, "Really?"
That's great. That's great. So tell us more now about what it is that you do in your coaching and especially this womanist movement that's the newer part of your work in the last few years.
Coaching is that job that I never, it will stop me when I've gone on too long. Coaching is that job that I never thought I would ever have. It is the most fun I've ever had in my whole life. I honestly love it so much. I'm like, you pay me a lot of money to do this. And it's just wonderful to be able to be someone's. So my client was talking to me today. She goes, there are coaches that only ask you questions and they don't tell you anything. And I'm like, wow, really? Wow. I'm like, I want you to talk to me. Otherwise, why are you here? So coaching is that place where you get to be someone's 1,000% have their back cheerleader. And I just think we don't have enough people like that in our lives, And so I get to coach. I've coached some insanely famous people, household name people again and again over time. And then I've coached women that are building huge businesses. And so like there's a business that a client of mine came in and she had taken her 10 years to get to 15 million in revenue. And it took us 7 more years to get her to 52 million. I have a client that came in at 90 million last year, and she's now at 120 million. These are very big numbers, but you also have the person that has 350,000 pounds they're making, and you can get them to 600,000 in a year. And you just know, because after all, I've done this so many times, I'm kind of looking at them and I'm like, yeah, no. So I coach men and women, but I always pitch to women because I always enjoy having them as a client. And I coach to that space between self-confidence and self-esteem. I think the external facing part of us is the self-confidence, but the self-esteem is what we think of ourselves. And my belief is that the universe is not something that happens to you. The universe is something that you make happen from you. And that's what I teach. And I teach that all day. And that's what I believe about myself as well. Hence the comments about the spa. But, I've recreated my whole life. And I think that. So that's what I do for a day job. And then I read a court transcript of this man who'd been sexually abusing women for a very long time. He was our own Harvey Weinstein, because, everybody needs one. And this idiot, the women in his office, they'd been trying to take him to court for 18 years. The judges kept going, stop raping them. They don't like it. Give her 100,000 pounds and off you go. And it was awful. And you're reading this story. This is in 2023. And the woman said that we nominated one of us each day, that when he went down in the lift, we'd ring down and go, he's on his way, get behind a locked door. And I'm like, what do you mean? How can anyone up the road from me? You mean women are having, and I have been poor and helpless and without any choices. And I was like, wow, I recognize that these women are trapped and they have no way out, because if they did, they would have taken it. And I just thought, this is so not fair. And I have to tell you that I never wanted to fix it. I have done so much pushing uphill. I have had fights with Coca-Cola, with Innocent, with all these people. And I'm like, no. I need my superficial era. I want to stroke a nice little handbag and my pina colada and sit in the corner. And the universe was like, hold my beer. So it ended up not being like that. And I didn't want to do something about it. And then my daughter got fired from her job for missing her work because she had a bad period. And so she missed 2 days of a shift at her university cafe and got fired. And she was just like, Mama, do something. And I was like, oh, really? And nobody else wanted to do it. So I thought, drat, I'll do it. And so I thought, what is it that we do? What is it that we need? And I'm good at changing things, and I'm good at not being ignored. And I thought, what would I do? What could I do if I gave it 5 years? Because that was my negotiating with the universe. I'm like, I'll give it 5 years, and then I want to go stroke a handbag in a corner. The universe is like, ha, ha, ha. So I created this organization because I looked at it, and it's very analytically, right? Very basic level. You have a man's washroom and a woman's washroom. They're biologically compatible, and they're under the same roof. Nobody cares. Nobody complains. Nobody cares. They're just there. Perfect. Let's create a man's workplace, which already exists, and then a woman's workplace, so that they exist under the same roof, but women can bring their biology to work. We don't have to come to work and pretend we're men. And I thought, now what can I do with that? And that started for me the womanist movement, because the core understanding for me is this: let's reimagine the world for women. Let's just do that. Let's just assume normal means white man, traditional means rich white man, and oligarch means horrible asshole white man, excuse the French. And what would we do if we just created a world that worked for women from everything? The crash test dummy that was a woman, the first time a crash test dummy was a female was last week. Last week. So
wow.
That's just ridiculous, right? So I'm like, okay, and I want to be able to bring my biology to work. I want, as a woman, my children must be able to, your children, why can we not bring our biology to work? Men can. Why can't we? So bring our periods to work, bring our perimenopause to work, bring the fact we have babies to work, bring the fact that we have our cultural obligations of looking after elderly parents to work. That's where WCO came in. So we walk into institutions and we say, right, let's help you to restructure your workplace so that easily and effortlessly you have a tandem workplace that lets women bring their biology to work, and the results remain the results. You, in fact, make more money. You, in fact, don't lose money. And the ROI on this is super high. So I created a scaffolding of ideas that would help us to reimagine the world. WCORE was one. And Green Flag came about because of investment into women-run businesses is so low. It's less than 2%. And I was like, this is ridiculous. It's because you are judging women by a standard of how men build businesses. And I have been banging on for years about how women build businesses differently. It's needs-based, not opportunity-based. It tends to be legacy. We use less risk and we like to build legacy-based businesses. So I thought, let me create a criteria, a certification for you to judge if this business is good when it's being run by a woman, because you obviously are not asking the right questions. Stop asking me if I'm going to have a baby, for heaven's sake, and actually ask me if I make a profit. So I the questions. And then the third scaffolding is one for allyship, which I had a really lovely group of men help me create, where men are always saying, but we don't know what to do. And I'm like, I get that. Here, do this. Do these questions, answer the certification. It will teach you how to react and how to do and how to be a good man. And so that's the kind of starting point. And I want to take that and I want to build this whole thing into a think tank for women.
That's amazing. And it's, I mean, first of all, thank you for embracing that, even though you didn't want to. But I want to say that I love how I can hear in your language that, even though you are producing this area of comfort for women to biologically show up at work, you're still working in this male space of like, let's look at ROI. Let's look at,
completely,
compatibility and profit analysis. Here's a structure. Like that's so important. So I think you are the universe put this in your lap because you're the right person to be able to do this, because there's a lot of fanfare out there for women supporting women in business. But I've never seen before a crossover to say, okay, let's actually let women show up in predominantly the male workspace, embrace who they are, and actually see the benefit of that. So congratulations on setting up, those kind of three different pillars in how to embrace this and move forward. And obviously it has had some good acceptance when you've had men already working with you on the process. And I saw a map on your website of places where this has moved all across the world. So It is being embraced. And I want to ask, just as some examples, what kind of things do you see being put into workplaces to actually allow this to happen? Is there like a more flexible work day, for example? Is there part-time opportunities, even in a corporate setting? What does that look like?
So it's one of those things that, and thank you, because it's such a good question, but it's one of those things where I had a client I was coaching yesterday, and she goes, why do I feel like saying to my staff, you're not working hard enough? I need you to work harder. And I was like, well, you know what? Why don't you take a step back and ask them to tell you what they think the results are they should create? Then why do you care? Would you pay them the same amount of money if they had those results, if they work 4 hours, if they work 24 hours, right? And she goes, oh my God, take the money, give me the result. This is the joke in the 80s in banking, when they were going through one of the banks, and I think it was JP Morgan or someone. And somebody said, why is that man wearing shorts? He goes, he makes the most money in this organization. He can come to work naked and I don't care. It's that concept. It's a very male concept. And I'm like, okay, so if that's what we're doing, let's look at results. And the only thing I want you to do is look at results. Therefore, everything before that is utterly irrelevant. It's infrastructure and a construct. So look at having a place where it's flexible working. If I'm in the middle of a perimenopausal hot flush, you best believe I am not coming to work at 9 o'clock. But I tell you what, I will work till 3 in the morning to send you the thing. And when you wake up in the morning by the deadline, you will have what you have, because that's what women are like. There is not a woman in the world that needs to, there's not a mother in the world that need to have a productivity course or a time management course or like all that stupid crap. We don't need that. We do it before we've done 4 hours. Like most parents have done 4 hours of work before they hit an office. You know, so give them the space to produce and create and give you the results that you want. And if you have clarity on that result, that is a very different scenario, because that result is the ROI that you are looking for. So
Amazing.
we do very basic things like that.
I love that. And so how are you finding reception from the typical oligarchy, rich white man, CEO world? How is, you know, seeing it across 6 continents is fantastic, but I'm sure it's a difficult push in some ways.
Yeah, it is. The AI that I used last year in December last year sent me a message going, wow, congratulations. You were in the top 7% of our global users of this AI this year. And I was like, that is not a compliment. I'm never doing that again. That's just really, you know. So I couldn't get any men to last year. I could not get any men to take up W Court. And I was like, I had 2 men. They were both friends of mine. And I kind of grabbed them and I was like, sit and get certified. And they were lovely, you know. And I couldn't get, so I cold called 74 men, which was a real experience, I'll tell you. And in the beginning, I was like, oh, let me tell you. And then by the 3rd call, I was like, just mansplain to me what would make this an attractive offer. And then at the end of 74 calls, I worked out that the only thing they cared about was making money. And if I wanted them to pay attention, I had to move out of the auspices of HR and into the lap of the chief revenue officer. And that when I did that, he would pay attention. So then I started booking myself into male-only tech conferences as a speaker. Oh, bad. I would
great
have
fun.
Oh my God, I would be like sweating before, but these men were so nice to me and they were paying attention. They would book calls. None of them ever converted, not one, but I learned so much. So what I did, which you will find interesting, is I changed the story of what we were doing.
Yeah.
And so the people that have converted are women-run businesses that are, you know, because we'll certify you from having 2 people in your business. Because if you have 2 people, you have a workspace. And as far as I'm concerned, we'll take you from there. And we have had men come and reach out. We have had accelerators. We had a venture capital firm. So we have people. It's getting momentum at the rate of like 3 degrees more than a snail.
It's movement.
So, yeah, you have to not.
Yeah. And I love that you recognized that you needed to change the story, because, you know, if it's all about money, then you make the pitch all about money.
Like, we're having our first law firm. Now that I consider a serious win. We have never managed to get a law firm to convert because they're awful places to work. And so what they would do is they would send me a woman and go, see, she's doing really well. So we're great with women. We have so many women. And you're like, this woman says she dropped her child off at the nursery. Her 4-year-old child went to nursery at 6 a.m. this morning and was ill. And so they can only keep her till 7 p.m. tonight. So, and I'm just like, this is not what we meant. We didn't mean this. This is not how anyone should live. You know, it's so sad. So, but, you know, if that's what you have to do, go you. Because if you have to make the money to do this, but don't be telling me that that's what other women want, because that's not necessarily true. The way you choose is not what everybody should choose. What if I want to be able to work? I worked in a law firm with a woman who was really interesting. She wanted to take off at least 4 weeks in the summer So she just negotiated with these guys. She was so wily. She negotiated with them. How much money do I have to bring in a year? And they said this much. She was like, great. She's like, do you care when I bring in the money? And I had the most enlightened boss. He goes, no, just bring it. She went, got it. And she would nail the amount of money she had to bring in. And then she would take summer off and hang out with her kids. And everybody complained. And he was like, she brought in that much money. You haven't brought in that much money, you know? So
Yeah.
I now have a law firm who I'm certifying not the week after next. And I am beyond excited.
That's amazing. And that, you know, that speaks to that example with that woman. That really speaks to motivation, right? Like if in this corporate world that is set in this, I was going to say 9 to 5 standard, but that's not a day anymore.
No.
We all know people are putting in a lot more hours than that to keep their jobs. If that kind of motivation could be, you know, if I could do the work in 4 hours or 14 hours, doesn't matter. If I could bring you in this much money and not show up for 4 weeks, doesn't matter. Like that's a great conversation to have with anybody, because companies want to make money. And
you would think so, but it turns out it's not true. It turns out that a very masculine approach, weirdly, is to be very performative about how you make money. And it isn't until COVID happened that men were forced to confess to the fact that, and not all men, it's the bosses,
yes,
that performative is as important as revenue. And you're like, oh, so it's not that you just want me to make money. You want to see me doing that too.
Yes, that is very true, right? You don't often see people get recognized for effort unless they're putting in extra hours, they're working weekends, they're, you know, kind of doing that grind, and that's very performative. It's not necessarily performance.
Yeah.
Right. It's all appearances. Wow. So yeah, I feel like there are a lot of stories there that you are going to have to continue to tweak to break through those barriers. But I think it's important work, and I think there is a shift, you know, in the world, that I think there is more of a female energy starting to become present overall.
Yeah.
And it's important to see that represented in the workplace. So it's wonderful, this work that you're doing. Give me one message that you would like to share with male CEOs about the value of having women in their workplace.
Let me give you an example. My father was a farmer. When you till soil with the same seed again and again and again and again, what does it do? Monoculture weakens the soil. Yeah. It makes the soil less nourished, weaker, and it cannot support growth in the same way. And what happens when you add in diversity of seeds and diversity of planting, that soil replenishes, nurtures, and gets much, much stronger and is able to give you stronger plants. So if you look at that as an adage, what is happening is the majority of according to Morgan Stanley, the majority of the money and the spend in the world is going into the hands of women in the Western world. And I think in the UK this year, it was over 63%. And I think in the US, it's next year. So if you don't have women there, you are going to be unable to speak to the people that you need to, who are going to be the decision makers, and to understand that women are different to men. Mm-hmm. Good thing, because they're buying things. Like I went to buy a sports car, and I like driving fast cars. It's literally my only vice, because it was the only vice that didn't interfere with feeding with my kids, because I would pay in installments, whatever. I remember going to BMW, and the guy said to me, "When's your husband coming?" I went to Mercedes, and the guy like pushed me away, and I went to, I can't remember. I went to car, and they were so offensive and rude. And really, these men were like, why are you here wasting our time? Because I was a young woman and a young brown woman wanting to buy a sports car. Mm-hmm. And I got a Porsche, and this gorgeous man, Simon, was 12. I don't know. Simon was 20 something years old. Simon did not care which hill I came from, behind or around. Simon looked at me and he saw a woman who liked a car, and he said, "Do you like this car?" I'm like, "So much." He goes, "You want to drive it?" I'm like, "Yes." And I bought cars only from Simon for the last 15 years.
Yeah.
That we make those decisions that way.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I remember reading something many, many years ago now about car manufacturing, actually even finally taking into account like women wearing high heels and how that would affect the position of the gas pump and all of those
Somewhere to
kinds of
put your
things.
handbag.
Yeah. Because often women are buying cars. Women are also buying the car for the family because, they need the kids to fit in and all those kinds of things. So, women are making a lot of the purchasing decisions out there. That's absolutely for sure. So this has been such an interesting conversation. I feel like I could talk with you about this for hours because it's a dynamic conversation and it's ever shifting, right? I'm sure you're finding that it's
Yeah.
changing all the time. And as I said, I feel like you are the right person for this job because it just sounds to me like you have this ability to really see both sides of it, and that's so important. Having a liberal woman going in there and pounding on somebody's door is not going to get the effect that you need from these typical male CEOs, right? So that's wonderful. So I would love to show the audience now how all of these things that I've learned about you and your life and your passions and your work, how we can share a story that we can turn into a business story that will actually help people understand a little bit more about what it is that you do. So tell me the first story that pops into your head. It could be a childhood memory, could be, last time you took a fast drive in your Porsche. What pops into your head as a personal story that you could share?
I remember, I wish it was a nice one, but this is the story. I remember walking out of my marriage and
Mm.
thinking, I can't go back there. It's not safe. And I remember my mother saying, you have to go back because that's how my belief system requires you to go back. It doesn't matter if you're not safe. I remember asking my ex-husband saying, I will not give you a penny of our joint money because until you come back. And I remember the people who was going to give us somewhere to live said, no, we can't give you anywhere to live. Why don't you go back till we find you somewhere to live? And I remember all these no's against what was an obvious danger for me and my three children under the age of 7. And I remember thinking, I did not matter to any of these people. And the only way I mattered is if I did what they wanted me to do.
Mm-hmm.
And it was a revelatory moment because I thought, well, if I'm not going to matter to you unless I behave how you want me to behave, this good girl crap is obviously a waste of my time. So I'm just not going to do that anymore. And my only goal is how do I become the most powerful woman that I know that I can be? And that
Mm-hmm.
I didn't know what that was. I didn't know I didn't even know how to elucidate it that clearly then. I just knew there had to be another way. And I chose that way, whatever that was. And that has been the thing that has run my adult life.
Yeah, excellent. So I would say that a great way that you could use that in an upcoming speech somewhere or talking to a CEO is talking about this situation. You know, just going back into, I recall when I was in my early 20s and found myself single with 3 kids and having, even in the hardest decision of my life, finding that I needed to follow rules or follow protocol of some sort in order to feel safe. Everybody was putting me in a position where I should go back or I should do something else so that I could secure accommodation and find safety. And I have found that as a continued message to women everywhere. We always need to fit inside a box that someone else has built for us.
Absolutely.
And I am looking through the womanist movement to make sure that our own box shows up wherever it is that we are in the world. So I hope that is something that might inspire you to share with others. Often when we share these kinds of stories of, personal upheaval, personal triumph, whatever it may be, it really does help to connect with our audience. There's science-backed data that shows these neural pathway connections we have when we share stories. So I really want to thank you so much for being my guest today. This was an absolute pleasure and honor to meet you. And I thank those of you who are watching this, whether it's live or on the replay. I'm sure you've got a lot of information out of this and a lot of inspiration. how would you like people, Gita, to follow you, to learn more about your work? Is there a website you want to direct them to, social media, anything like that that you want to share with the audience?
Thank you so much for having me on. I really appreciate it. So there's wcorporation.org is the website for W Corp. But otherwise, just put my name into any platform and we're there. DM me, have a conversation. Super happy to hear from you from LinkedIn, Instagram, TikTok. I'm only not on X. Other than that, I'm on all the others. And we just have different. We like in Instagram we talk about empowerment. On TikTok we talk about perimenopause and workplaces. LinkedIn we talk very much about the structure of work. So anywhere.
Yeah, fantastic. And I love how you have, again, kind of segmented those platforms so that
Yeah, we divvied it up.
you're speaking to the audience on those platforms in a way that that they'll receive that message. So that's fantastic. So again, thank you for joining me. Thank you to the audience. Remember that stories allow you to be authentic. They allow you to create your social media, develop your marketing strategy, close more sales. It's all about connecting with story. Let story be your guide. And I look forward to speaking with you again next week. Thanks for joining. And don't forget to follow Gita, look up her work and her website, and follow her on social channels. I'm sure you've got a lot more to come from her.